On the Royal Norfolk Showground, they were assembled, row upon row of them, all with the same heritage, but all individual, and all celebrating one of the most remarkable cars in the history of motoring, the Lotus 7. September 2007 marked the 50th anniversary of Colin Chapman's inspired creation that's caused Pulses to race since its inception. Back in June, Donington saw another gathering, with 330 cars competing at a similar celebration of the original 7 and also 21 years of Caterham motorsport. The Caterham 7s carried on the Chapman tradition for the last 34 years, due to the enthusiasm of another foresighted individual, Graham Nairn. Most recently, Ansar Ali led a management buy-in that took over the mantle of safeguarding the car's future from the Nairn family, lending hope that it'll continue for decades ahead. Tributes to the car were generous.
The Lotus 7 is an absolute prime example of a motorsport as it should be.
I think the 7 is known as a motorcycle on 4 wheels. It's very exhilarating.
Fun is the key thing. You walk amongst all the cars, and no one car is the same.
It's a racer for the road. I mean, it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful driving experience.
It's a very individual car, and it suits people who are a little bit individual rather than just buying a routine car.
I see 330 race drivers queuing up at 7 o'clock in the morning looking to register, and that they can't wait to get out on the circuit. I take a great deal of pride out of that, and I'm a Cheshire cat today.
Colin Chapman first ventured into the production car market in the early 50s with the Lotus 6, a typical clubman special with a steel tubing chassis clad in aluminium. About 100 were built using standard components where possible and fitted with a variety of engines. By 1955, Chapman was more concerned with his developing line of racing cars like the Lotus 11, and road car production ceased. Such had been the success of the 6 in competition that he was later persuaded to design the 7, embodying the essential Chapman philosophy of less is more, that produced so much success over his lifetime.
Chapman, of course, was and became very famous for his cars. I think he designed and built 92 sports cars and racing cars by the time he died. Won 5 world championships and 7 constructors' championships, that kind of thing.
To Chapman in the 50s, the 7 was not a major concern, a bread-and-butter project, the sort he might have dashed off in a weekend. Edward Lewis had a role in the original design.
The idea for the 7, which I made from my Mark 9 Lotus with Mark 6 configuration of bodywork, was at the end of 1956.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the Lotus 7 from Colin Chapman until the end of 57. My FPV carried forward. Colin took that and moved it forward to the commercially viable Lotus 7 that came out in late 57. But it's all history now, and it was all very good fun and done in good spirit.
7 was one of the very early cars that he built. He'd actually moved on to about Mark 11, and he left a gap for the 7, which in fact was a commercial production, or the first car sold in any kind of volume, if you like, to the general public. I mean, the first car he sold was the Mark 6. This is the one with which I got involved back in '59.
And that was as a dealer, selling cars?
That was a dealer. Chapman appointed what he called Lotus Centres.
Right.
And you sold Lotus 7s, this is this one, and the Lotus Elite. And those are the cars that we sold. So I used to pick up this type of car in kit form from the factory in Cheshunt. And I used to arrive there, never ready for me, and they'd walk around and I'll give them a hand to build the kit up, and they'd throw in a few nuts and bolts. I
was going to say, did the kits come complete, or were they missing a few bits?
Well, I seem to recall in those days it was worse because they actually had too many bits. The store was like, oh, chuck in a few nuts and bolts for good luck, and people ring up and say, fantastic, love building it, but I'm very worried, I've got these nuts and bolts left, where do they go?
Before long, the premises in Cheshunt were proving inadequate, and Colin Chapman decided to move in 1961 to Norfolk and a greenfield site at Hethel.
We're moving our manufacturing plant up into Norfolk to a location just south of Norwich, And of course, we're all very excited about this.
What's your reason for this particular area? Why the choice of Hethel?
Well, I think Norwich is a very nice area. East Anglia, I've always been very keen on East Anglia. I spent some time here just after the war, and they were very keen to have us. They welcomed us there, and we had the facilities we needed. We wanted room for expansion. We wanted room to have our own private test circuit, and the facilities of an old aerodrome suited us very much indeed.
Do you imagine you'll be bringing all your old staff here, or will you be recruiting local labour as well?
Well, I don't know. I should think it would be about 50-50. A lot of people, of course, are keen to get out of London nowadays, and we shall bring some of those with us. But we are very keen to try to get as many local people to join us as we can.
Chapman's priority at Hethel was the innovative but troublesome Elite, while the 7 provided cash flow to keep the company healthy. The first of many developments gave birth to the Series 2.
Oh, the chassis was different, and the quite a number of differences. They went to wider wheels and tyres, and of course they followed on with a different engine depending what was available at the time. Not a lot of difference, but certainly dimensionally there was a lot of difference. And this is probably the ultimate one, the Series 2, which got the 1500 Cosworth engine in it, which is probably a bit of an icon, really. And at that time, I mean, they made the transition from Cheshunt to Hethel, and back in the Cheshunt days, so the books tell us, that was really their major source of income. But by the time they'd gone to Hethel, they were doing lots more interesting things. I mean, they were making the Elan, they were making the Europa, and they were involved in just about every form of single-seater motor racing, from Formula 1, 2, 3, Formula Ford, Formula Atlantic, and so on.
And the people that are buying these cars off you, do they all have them in yellow and green? Because most of them seem to be that are here from this era.
Well, that's the popular colour, because those are the Lotus racing colours.
Yeah.
It was natural that the road cars should reflect the successful race cars, and Edward Lewis knew that the 7 could also function as both.
Well, let's put it this way. My idea, I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's my idea. I wanted a car that I could do racing in. I could do a bit of building if I wanted to. I could change the sparking plugs without having to get 3 mechanics to do it. And I had a very limited budget and a limited amount of money that I was prepared to spend on racing or motorsport in general. So it suited me. And apparently it suited a hell of a lot of other people who don't want to go to the expense of 5 mechanics, a transporter, and all the gubbins that's going with it today in the top end. We were just amateurs enjoying it.
People were buying them as road cars or race cars, or to do a bit of both with?
Yeah, race cars in the sense of you know, club racing.
Yeah.
Not out-and-out racing. And so once they got to this, for whatever good reason, they decided to generally lose a bit of interest in it, if I can put it that way, and they concentrate on their other activities, which are far more rewarding, and they generally thought that the demand was lapsing and their enthusiasm was certainly lapsing. But they reappointed a chap called David Lazenby to run Lotus Components, which produced all of the racing cars bar Formula 1. And we had a chat, and he decided, well, he could continue making the Series 2. A clear understanding, he'd build them and I'd sell them. And we just shook hands on that, and that was the deal.
The deal meant that Graham Nairn effectively took over all the sales and marketing of the 7 from his base in Caterham-on-the-Hill in Surrey. The old premises have long been replaced, but the flats and workshops behind recall the site's significance.
And that took us right the way through to '68 with the Series 3, where by that time the demand was increasing. We did a fair old job of publicity, I think. And what we did a series called The Prisoner. And Patrick McGowan, who was the lead actor and major writer of the whole series, walked into the factory looking to use a car. I think Lotus were trying to talk him into a Lotus Elan, and he saw the old Lotus 7 demonstrator sitting over in the yard and said, "I'll have that car." And that was used as the introduction to the series, prime time, 7 o'clock Sunday night. There was a Lotus 7 coming straight to the cameras, and it was used in a couple of episodes as well. So that all helped move it up to a higher gear.
Graham Nairn had a minor role in the series, driving the emblematic car, but was shrewd enough to request publicity photographs with McGowan by way of payment. The car was also proving popular on the track as a cheap and exciting racer.
I'd been running in monoposto. I was impecunious at the time. I had a friend who had a Lotus 7 which I was preparing. I then prepared a second Lotus 7. I raced it in the 1968 Clubman Series and also raced at Snetterton, and for a 1 litre car it was very, very successful. We converted it to independent rear suspension, and I then got to know Graham Nairn, and we went on to have a friendly relationship throughout, particularly the 68 season, and that led me to driving for him for Club Lotus in the Birkett 6-hour relay race in 1968.
Under the purchase tax regulations of the time, a customer could roughly halve the cost of his new car by building it himself. It required a degree of sophisticated accounting, with the chassis and components coming from 2 separate companies, and it also meant there was no workshop manual.
One of the ways they got around that was to publish, I think it was in the Lotus Owners Club magazine. They published a whole series of articles on how the Lotus 7 could be stripped down and completely overhauled. And if you read that backwards, you had to have all series, obviously. If you read it backwards, it'll tell you how to build it. So we resuscitated the Series 2 in a sense that we upgraded it. Later Ford engine, bigger wheels and tyres, a few bits and pieces like that, but essentially the same car. And that progressed right through very successfully, to the point where the then managing director, I suppose he would have been, of Lotus Components, decided to expand production generally and really go for it in a big way, and he came up with the Series 4. It was really geared up for higher production and higher supply of spare parts and so on. And then in the early 70s, one of the government secret weapons was coming out called VAT. It came out in 1973, and that meant that Lotus lost the advantages they had, because by selling them in kit form, there was no purchase tax payable. Purchase tax was only payable on a complete motor car, but not on spare parts, which Lotus sold. So we went on the Series 4, and as I say, the VAT came out in 73. We also got hit to the country, that did, by a pretty major slump. Doubling of oil prices, interest rates going to 18% and all those wonderful things. So that really put the limit on as far as Lotus were concerned. They weren't making much money out of it anyway, so they could just see a lot of aggravation, and they decided to stop it. And that's when I chatted to Chapman about it, and he said, well, yes, okay. And we essentially did the deal as far as he was concerned. He was able to shift all his spare parts and anything to do with the Lotus 7 out. So he didn't have anything more to do with it. It did sell very well in its day. I think it had, had the Lotus badge on it, had very good publicity, so there was a demand for it.
And they made a dinky toy too, because I had one. I remember a little dinky toy.
Yeah. But it had also different features. For example, with the earlier Lotus 7s, you just lifted off the bonnet. This one is forward hinging. And if you take the bonnet off, you can actually get the chassis body unit in. The front of the chassis is such you can lower the engine and gearbox in without using a block and tackle, although you'd need to be pretty strong to do it. But it's fiberglass. It was the car that I ended up buying from Chapman, if you like, because that's what was on offer.
Yeah.
And we did produce it at Caterham for a while. But I think the interest was probably going to wane. The reason being that there wasn't a big following for it second-hand. The big thing with the earlier cars was that there was always a good second-hand demand for it, which meant they very good retention on prices. It's very encouraging when you buy a car to know you're not going to lose a fortune when you want to resell it, which tended to be, so for all those reasons that all came together, and I think Lotus were a bit short of finance anyway.
Despite the continued success of the 7 in Graham's hands, Clive Chapman is convinced his father did the right thing in selling.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because Dad must have felt that the company had to progress. He wanted to progress with everything. He was always trying to develop, and he really wanted to move on to the higher level of the car market in terms of luxury and speed and performance, and that took him into a different marketplace. So, yeah, it would have been nice to carried on making the 7. It would have been nice to have carried on making the original Elan, particularly when you see the MX-5 driving around. You think, well, hang on, that's an Elan. But Dad, that was his nature, was to press on. He was never interested in doing the same old thing. that doesn't mean that other people can't enjoy the original idea that he had. And it's nice that they do.
There was always demand, good demand, second hand for the Series 2, Series 3, Series 1 and so on. And we let it be known that we got enough spares to make a limited number of Series 3s. And the phone never stopped ringing. The phone never stopped ringing.
Now listen, I should get shot if I don't ask the question. You don't have to answer it. But can you remember how much you paid for all the rights and all the bits and pieces from Lotus?
Well, vaguely, but
Okay.
well, it was quite complicated. Well, it wasn't complicated, it was pretty straightforward. In as much as, yes, I paid money, and I also agreed to pay, on the 7 anyway, a royalty of something so much per car up to a certain number. So it was spread out. I mean, I didn't have a big lump sum I could just dump on the table. They could quite see it was a deal where they got some money, and it was a deal that was going to be fulfilled, so they would get the money over time. And that's the way it works. And of course I was able to say, well, if you really want to get your money fairly quickly on royalties, let me go back to Series 3. So they said, well, why not? That didn't bother them. Yeah. And that's how it progressed. It never really got underway from a production point of view. We took it over from Chapman in 1973. Never really got going till the end of the 70s when Thatcher came in and sorted out the unions. Because it was a terrible time. You could always have demand for the cars. You could never build them. There was always somebody on strike, somebody couldn't bring something in, or whatever it was. And you had to keep jacking up the prices because of the raging inflation, and we survived anyway. And the 80s were good. Yeah.
And of course, during all this time, the resale values, you said it might have been a bit of an issue with the Series 4, but it was never an issue really for Caterhams or for Lotuses at that point. Suddenly everybody wanted one. If you couldn't afford a new one,
you had to buy a second. Yeah, that's right. So that all continued. That was fine. That was the production story.
And so you've bought some chassis and you've bought all the bits and pieces and whatnot. Then you have to start making cars. Who do you turn to when you have to start making all the bits or sourcing all the bits yourself?
Well, there was a formidable amount of goodwill from the suppliers. People like Arch Motors who made the chassis, for example. And there was goodwill from Ford Motor Company and all the major suppliers. So we never had too much of a problem, I don't think, with suppliers, other than their ability to actually provide the bits that we wanted, which is always another problem. But in terms of actually sourcing the parts, that was a lot of work, but it wasn't a hurdle we couldn't overcome. It was pretty straightforward.
And whilst all this is going on, you've got a bunch of kids, 2 sons, both of which become involved in one form or another with the business, don't they?
Yes, that's right, yes. Yeah.
It's become a real family thing, hasn't it?
Well, it did at the time. I mean, Robert number 1 son was never going to work in the business, I don't think, but he's
quite happy to race the cars.
But he certainly raced very successful in a Caterham 7, of course. He got the lap record at the Nürburgring for a production car, which took for many years. And number 2 son Simon eventually took over running the company from me when I retired.
How many were built?
Well, in my time we built over 11,000.
And Lotus did 2 and a bit thousand?
2,300, something like that, yes.
They call it small volume, don't they? So they call it small volume, but 13,000, 14,000 cars.
Well, we had it every year by year, and doing, I think we probably used 800 in a phenomenal year and 500 in most years. So as the years go by, you tot up the numbers, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's still running.
If the road car was selling well, there were problems on the track where the competition was getting restless.
Deep down, they didn't like us. They didn't like it because they wanted to tempt in Ferraris and more exotic cars, which they didn't want because we would have... The 7's quick car, obviously. Take it on a tight clubman circuit, it'll win. Put it on a long circuit, it's up against aerodynamics, it's not going to win. But the authorities couldn't accept that, so we got banned. And then there was a memorial race, I think it was in 1982, for Colin Chapman at Brands Hatch, and they said, could we come up with a grid of 7s to race? So we got anybody we could think of who had a competition license, said just get your car there and race. We'll find a category for you. And that really was the start of it, because it was fantastic. We had over 30 cars on the grid. It was quite a moving experience.
Such has been the success of the 7 on the track that as many as 700 are now raced all over the world. And there was one very important ingredient to that success.
We came up with the notion of not just the notion of one-car racing, which they had done, but to actually make sure the rules were strictly interpreted. I mean, the simple rule is, unless it says you can do it, you can't. So nobody would adapt their car in any way, shape or form without it being in the regulations. And we also had the engines sealed, so people couldn't get ripped off by some merchant to tune his engine, you know. So that kept the cost down, which was part of the appeal, and also made for very close racing, which is all very much part of the appeal as well. So it's kind of, it had developed from there.
By the new millennium, the Nern family was ready to pass on the company, with its sales office now at the bottom of the hill in Caterham, and the factory that had moved to Dartford just before the October hurricane destroyed the old workshop. A willing buyer was found in a consortium led by Lotus engineer Ansar Ali.
I conducted the management buy-in in January 2005, so 2.5 years, although it feels like 2.5 days. It's been 2.5 tough years, inevitably, when you get a transition from a family-run business to a private equity-run business. Inevitably, things are different, and we've had obviously some other what I would call left hookers with regards to Rover and the collapse of Rover. But we've dealt with all those issues that have come our way, and now we go from strength to strength. And this weekend at Donington is, I think, a fantastic reflection of not only 50 years of the past, but more importantly, the steady footing that we're now on for the future.
Tell us a bit about the background to your involvement, because you work for Lotus. You obviously therefore knew a lot about the heritage of the company and the particular car. So how did you come to get involved in this whole business?
I'm an engineer by my first degree, and I got recruited when I was doing my management degree by Ford Motor Company. So from Ford I went to Lotus to become general manager at Lotus Cars. So it's been in my blood for a while, even before that. And when the opportunity came along, to be honest with you, an opportunity of a lifetime, it didn't take a lot of thinking about.
Have you ever owned one?
I have never owned one. I won't lie to camera in that regard. I've driven lots of them. I can't wait to get into racing, which I hope I'll get into racing next year. But no, I've never owned one.
Ansar was someone I got on very well with at Lotus Cars, and I was very pleased when he was kind enough to telephone me in the height of it all going on to explain what was happening, and yeah, really pleased by that. And he's just the kind of guy who has the spirit that you need to get you through the more challenging times that always seem to come up when the Lotus is around, and really make the most of and enjoy the happy, successful times which also come around when you have a Lotus. So.
Caterham's unusual in being a one-product company with a design essentially the same as the original from 50 years ago, something that might be seen as a disadvantage.
The cars might look the same, but they all have their own individual personalities, and in many ways that's what embodies our customer base as well. It's a very personal statement, the Caterham 7, and the work that we're doing from an engineering perspective is looking forward to how do we take what is very much an iconic design, take it forward, take it in terms of evolutionary steps rather than revolutionary steps, to make sure that we're around for another 50 years.
What's the biggest disadvantage of having to hang on to effectively the old shape?
Inevitably, people do see it as sort of an old, antiquated shape, and it's only until they get into the car do they realise just what the real essence of the car and the philosophy is that embodies what Colin Chapman did 50 years ago. And the product and the brand has remained true to that philosophy. So it's keeping that philosophy alive, and motorsport is the best way of doing that, and it underpins our business, and this is what the whole event here at Donington is about today. We have 320 race drivers who understand what the philosophy of performance through lightweight is, and our road customers who are going to be here in their throngs as well share a similar view. So it's not that difficult, to be honest. Our customer base managed to keep that flame alive.
From what you say, I imagine there'll be no similar projects to the old abortive 21.
I'd never say never, but yeah, certainly you're right. I think inevitably when it's an iconic shape like a Caterham 7, I think evolution is perhaps more important than revolution. And the car that we have here today, which is a concept car, the X330, embodies what we're looking at for the future from an engineering perspective, from materials perspective, but very much keeping the philosophy of the design true, because I think I think I would be burned at the stake if I was to change the shape of it. But it doesn't mean to say that it can't go through evolutionary step changes.
Can you really put any more power through those rear wheels?
Most certainly. I think the new chassis of which is the CSR, which we launched just over 2 years ago, which I think is a fantastic design of independent rear suspension and inboard front suspension, F1 type suspension. Gives such a compliant ride and in many ways can take more power. And the X330 concept car that we have today, which has 330 brake horse, just shows, and when people will get to drive it in terms of sort of development drives, will show how well that chassis can take more power.
How do you stand with regard to the continued legality of the car in terms of safety and all that sort of thing?
It's a fine line between having the engineering resource to try and stay up to date with regards particularly emissions. The new Ford Sigma range of engines that we've launched for UK SVA versions, we've also in parallel done a Euro 4 emission compliant Sigma engine for our European markets. Inevitably, I can't sort of influence legislation too far. If they start to insist of airbags and side impact bars and things like that, inevitably it will affect the design and the look and feel of the car. But I'm confident that that won't affect us, certainly for the next 10 to 15 years. And I would hope that day never actually comes, because I think it'll be a sad day when low volume craft manufacturers like ourselves, like Morgan, although Morgan inevitably have moved the needle forward in terms of a far more compliant vehicle. But it's sad to say that TVR couldn't keep pace, but we certainly will. We have the engineering resource and we have the network of partners to work with us to make sure we stay ahead of the game.
Crucial phrase you used there was low volume, so you really do have to stay, what, about the same size? Could you imagine doubling the numbers or quadrupling the numbers?
No, I have no aspirations of doubling the numbers in that regard. We certainly have volume aspirations, and particularly around motorsport and export markets. We've just launched a Caterham Academy in Portugal, for example, where we've, through the passion and enthusiasm of our partners there, we now have 22 cars racing at Estoril and at Braga, and very soon on the race circuit at Oporto. And we are looking to take Academy forward, and therefore, yes, I am looking for volume, but not seismic volume changes.
So where does the current car fit in the world of motoring? Is it meant for the track or the road? Andy Noble's been selling Caterhams practically since the beginning.
I think in this day and age, more and more people have it as a fun car, so it's a second, third, maybe even fourth car. I think in the early years, yes, a lot of people use it as their only car, but times change. People have become wealthier, and more people have got garages to put toys in, and obviously the Caterham's, right up on that list.
And in terms of specification, are you more concerned about it being good on the track or good on the road?
We offer something for everyone. Some customers will come along and say, I want a car for Sunday afternoons to go down to the seaside to go touring in it, and we can offer a specification for that. Other customers will come to us and say, I want the most outrageous car you can produce, and we can do that, and everything in between. So, there really is something for everyone.
And I understand that obviously there's tremendous popularity overseas as well.
Which is growing. The UK market is well established now, and we will keep building on that basis. But in a lot of overseas markets, we've still to break through. I mean, we are a niche product in a lot of countries, but if we continue getting exposure there, both with the motor racing and with our Caterham Drive experience, then it can only lead to